In a world where, unfortunately, words don't write themselves, the entire internet tries to distract you, and you often think, maybe I should just go and get a cup of tea and a custard cream biscuit before I start. A handful of perennial procrastinators try to battle against their natural laziness and become writers. Welcome to the Failing Writers Podcast.
Well, let's just say hello then and get on with it.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome back to the Failing Writers Podcast. A little in-betweeny episode this week because we are talking to Jessica Bull. Who's Jessica Bull, John?
Well, Jessica Bull is a debut author. She's written a book called Miss Austen Investigates.
Oh.
And it's been a little bit of a, what would you call it? Like a little debut hit.
A sensation.
Yes, a very long overnight sensation.
She's caused some minor tremors. So her, well, no, we'll get into that. I was going to tell you what kind of figures were flying around.
Yeah, mate,
when,
don't you tell us, John? Why don't you just let
I'm not
her
gonna
tell
tell you.
us? Let her tell us all about
Okay,
it.
should we go and talk to her then and find out?
I think that seems like a really good
Let's do
idea at
that.
this point.
Okay, let's do it.
Hey, well, thank you very much for joining us, Jessica. Much appreciated.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me.
That's all right. I assume you're pretty busy at the minute, I would imagine. After when did it launch?
It came out on the 25th of January in the UK, and yeah, it's been a kind of flurry of activities, like podcasts and writing things, and then a few in-person events as well, which have been really lovely.
So have you done some actual book signings?
I have, and I
Nice.
practiced my signature as well. I bought myself a kind of calligraphy.
For the past 15 years or just recently?
Just
or...
recently.
Right.
I felt woefully unprepared. So I bought myself
Yeah.
a Jane Austen style calligraphy felt tip and decided that I needed a proper author signature. So I sat down one weekend and wrote my name like about 500 times until I came up with something
Yeah.
that I thought was
commitment.
worthy. Because if
Yeah,
people are
it's
going to
true.
like pay for books that are signed, I feel like,
Yeah.
you can't just have my normal
No,
squiggle.
he doesn't want to put an X on it, do you?
No,
Yeah,
exactly,
good.
exactly.
But have you kept it serious? No, like little smiley face or anything?
Sometimes I do a kiss, which is, publishing etiquette, isn't it? You get a lot
You're
of emails
all
with
right with that.
Does
Yeah.
that happen to you guys? Do you get a lot of emails with like kisses on the end?
Just from each other, but occasionally,
Yeah.
occasionally from
It's
outside.
good. You have to share the love and support like that. Yeah.
So we wanted to talk to you about your journey to becoming a published writer. Where did it all start?
So I have always wanted to be an author since I was a child. Like I thought that was the point of learning how to write, was to write stories, to make your own kind of little
Yeah.
picture books.
Mm.
So that's always been the plan for me, really. But it took me a long time to get there. So my debut came out this year, and I'm 46 this year. So I've always written. I wrote short stories all the time when I was at school, and I wrote novels kind of in my 20s, and I even got as far as querying those novels and got some encouraging feedback. But I didn't really realise how encouraging the feedback was, because it wasn't like, this is amazing, we're going to publish this instantly and it's going to be a bestseller. It was, you've got some stuff to learn, go away and work on your craft and come back to us. So it took me a while to know how to deal with that, really, because at the time I had young children, and I was working a pretty full-on job. So I had managed to work in a field that involved writing, probably the kind of least sexy writing that you could possibly do.
I don't know. We've done some pretty unsexy writing in our time.
Well, this is why I wanted to talk to you, because I feel like there's a bit of an affinity there. So I worked in corporate communications, and I wrote a lot of things about IT.
Right.
So can you top that?
We've all stopped
Yeah.
listening already.
Um,
So
Yeah.
But it was the process of writing that I loved, and I think I learned a lot from. So I didn't really know how to deal with that immediately, and kind of sat on it for a few years. And then
So did that sort of take the wind out of your sails then, or were you ploughing on regardless?
it did. It was a combination of not knowing what to do with the feedback and circumstances in having young children, and a full-time job, and not really having any time to myself. I mean, have you ever tried to write with young children?
Excuses,
I know.
Jessica. We've heard them all before.
because
We've
said
said
that.
Well, I mean,
them all
we've used
I
a lot of them.
know.
So it wasn't just a case of throwing your toys out the pram, is what you're saying. It was like not really understanding how to kind of move on from that more than anything.
Yeah, because like in an ideal world, I think I would have gone and done like an MA in creative writing, because I did an English undergraduate degree, but then I ended up becoming a librarian and an IT comms consultant. So there wasn't the time, and it felt like a very indulgent thing to do, to go away and
Yeah, I get that.
and do that.
Especially when you've got like young children and things, isn't it? You don't feel like you can kind of go, well, look, you're 18 months now. You can fend for yourself. Mum needs to go off and do some writing. I'll be back by the time you're 3. Just crack on.
Mummy's busy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't come from the kind of family where most people go to university, let alone do postgraduate degrees or anything. So that it seems like a really indulgent thing to do, to turn around to kind of my parents and say, look, can I borrow some more money, because I'm going to be an author and I need to go and do an MA.
Yeah.
Would sound like as ridiculous as saying, like, can I have some money to go and do like a pop star course, because that's my future. Can you invest, please? So that didn't happen. And then during the pandemic, I started to write again, and I started to write again really for my mental health, just to keep me sane at a really difficult time. And luckily by then my children were older and they didn't really want to hang out with me so much anymore. So I really lent into the writing again as a way of keeping my mind busy, and as a kind of meditative task. And then in that time that I hadn't been writing, all these things had happened that made everything so much easier. So Curtis Brown had launched its online creative writing program, which was, in comparison to an MA, was really cheap and really convenient. And then on social media, things had really taken off with the writing community, and there were so many people I could reach out to for support, and all these great podcasts had come online just to encourage people like me that had sat on their dreams and hadn't done anything for a while. So I really kind of threw myself into that world and wrote 3 novels quite quickly.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was the third, sort of over about 2 years, 18 months, and it was the third novel that really took off, and that is Miss Austen Investigates, which is my debut. And then another kind of parallel thing had happened there, because I've been a Jane Austen fan since Colin Firth kind of walked out of that lake in his wet shirt. I'd been a Jane Austen fan. And the other thing that I really did to kind of get me through the pandemic was lean on that love of Jane Austen.
Lean on Colin Firth. No, yes.
Yeah, well, that would have been nicer maybe, but he wasn't available. So
and he was damp anyway.
Yeah.
Many people prefer a damp Colin Firth.
Well, either way.
Beggars can't be choosers, Jessica. Yeah, you take any level of moistness in Colin Firth will be absolutely fine.
Absolutely.
Anyway, let's move on.
Absolutely. So I started reading, rather than I'd kind of read all the novels and I'd watched all the adaptations, but what I started doing was reading about her life, and understanding how hard she had found it to write and to be published. And it was thinking that even the great, wonderful icon Jane Austen found it really tough to sit down and write for a good few years of her life, and really, really tough to get published, that made me think, well, what am I doing? Like, what's my excuse? Like, here is this woman who lost her home and had to move around a lot and rely on the hospitality of her family, and write longhand, and even sometimes brewing her own ink with really little hope of getting published. Like, what's my excuse? The laptop's right there. And where would we be if Jane Austen had given up? So it was those 2 things kind of working together, and then eventually everything clicked when I thought, well, why don't I tell that story?
And during the pandemic, were you just writing then, or did you do what all the rest of us did, which was Zoom quizzes and going out for a walk once a day?
Oh yeah, I was homeschooling and working allegedly at the same time.
I think I blocked that one out of my mind, actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
Until you mentioned it, I had completely forgotten about that, and now all the horrors come flooding back.
Yeah.
Oh, it's horrendous, wasn't it? Yeah, it was really, really horrendous. And my children didn't get on with that time at all. They both found it really, really hard.
Well, I blame the teachers.
Yeah, well, I mean, you probably wouldn't be wrong. So, it was horrendous, wasn't it? Yeah, I was trying at that time of trying to do everything, and just, on top of that, just being like really worried and, losing loved ones and seeing people suffer and just being like on high alert and anxious all the time.
You forget, don't you, just how much different stuff and stress and weirdness went on in that sort of 18 months period.
Yeah.
Looking back, it seems
thankfully,
like a completely different life, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah.
Very
yeah.
weird.
And I think, I hope that it gave me a reset, really,
Yeah.
and taught me to focus on what I really wanted to do. Because I remember thinking, I could die tomorrow. I could get this, like at the start when we all believed that, and people were just dying of infection really quickly, like fit, healthy people. And I remember thinking, like, I could drop dead tomorrow, and I've never written that novel. That thing that I was meant to get back to, that dream that was on the shelf, that I always thought one day I could, if I really, really tried hard enough, push through and do it. And I've missed it. I've blown
You
it.
just needed the sword of Damocles floating above your head to get you to do something.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people started becoming more creative, didn't they?
Yeah, there's a lot of fantastic debuts this year, and when I speak to them, a lot of people's story is, I wanted to do it, and then finally during the pandemic, I thought, well, if not now, then when?
Yeah, well, absolutely. It's really encouraging to hear. I think you said sort of 46 debut novel. It gives 44-year-olds like me hope there's still time. Probably too late for John, but yeah, for some of the rest
I'm
of
doomed.
us. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that was the other thing about Austen's story, in that she'd had this big gap, and she'd had all these frustrations. So she had written the first drafts of Pride and Prejudice, Northanger Abbey, and Sense and Sensibility by the time she was 23.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, what an overachiever.
Yeah, slow down.
And then her dad decided to retire, basically, and being an unmarried daughter, she just had to like up and go wherever her dad went.
Yeah.
And they decided to take these long holidays in Bath and along the south coast. She just couldn't. I mean, it's wrong to say that she didn't write at all, because she did. She started The Watsons, which was a story about somebody whose dad was going to die, and then her dad did die, so that became a bit too close to home, so she kind of gave up on that project. And then she sold the rights to Northanger Abbey, or Susan as it was called then, for £10. Must have been really excited about that coming out imminently. But the publisher, I mean, we think that publishing moves at a really slow pace today, but the publisher advertised it as forthcoming and then sat on it for 6 years.
Blimey.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine how frustrating that would have been?
Yeah.
And we've got this letter. So she sold it in 1803, and then we've got this letter that she wrote to the publisher in 1809 saying that they haven't published it, so she presumes it's an oversight, so she's sent them the manuscript again, and if they don't publish it, she'll self-publish it. And she uses a pseudonym. She calls herself Mrs. Ashton Dennis, so that she can sign off, I am Sirs, M.A.D., mad. So yeah, she had that enormous gap, and then it wasn't until 1809, when she was in her late 30s, and her wealthy brother gave her and her mum and her sister a cottage, that she was able to get down to it and polish up those drafts and find a way to get published.
Your previous novels that you'd written then, were they anything to do with Jane Austen, or was that a recent?
So the first one I wrote was a contemporary romance. The second one was just so bad at like being out of any kind of genre.
Tell us more about that one.
Yeah, that's the one. Seems like the one we should focus on, I think.
Well, I wanted to write historical fiction, but I didn't really know how to do that. Like, I read a lot of historical fiction, but I didn't know how to research, how to build a historical world on paper. So I thought, I'll just write fantasy, but there's no dragons or anything in it. It's just there's no magic. But it was an exercise in plotting, so it was a kind of revenge thriller.
It's very realistic fantasy.
Yeah. And then I got to the end of that and thought, this isn't publishable.
It's quite clever though, isn't it? Writing a historical novel, but you call it fantasy. So if people go, well, this is incorrect.
Yeah.
It's nonsense. You go, no.
Yeah, I wish I could get away with that
This
now.
is fantasy.
Yeah.
This is fantasy. So it doesn't need to quite make sense.
Well, there's a lot of crossover skills, I think,
Yeah.
in that with historical and with fantasy, you need to do a lot of world building, and really good fantasy writers obviously do all that world building and treat it as if it's a historical world where everything makes sense. But I didn't do that. I was just, kind of playing around. But it was good for plotting, because the first novel that I'd written, the feedback that I'd had was the description's great, but there's not a lot happening. It's a bit boring.
And was that a genre novel? Was that a romance or
Yeah, that was a contemporary romance.
where nothing happens?
Well,
but presumably people fell in love. Presumably,
exactly. Well, apparently that wasn't enough. So I just killed everyone in the second novel and have just kind of carried on from there, really.
In revenge.
Yeah. And then the third, the one before the Jane Austen one, it was actually based on Jane Austen, but not overtly. So I'd used her as an inspiration. I thought, well, if I'm going to set it in this world, who do I know the most about so that I can make it authentic? So it was about, a young woman who was born the same year and really close to her sister, and had a mystery element and a romance element. And I knew it was working because my writing group would say things like, "Oh, she's very Lizzie Bennet, isn't she?" And then I was meant to be editing that, like, kind of, because also I made all the mistakes again that you can make in writing a first novel, in that it was trying to do too much genre-wise in being mystery and romance, and then it was multi-POV, it was dual timeline, it was everything that you can't. That's really hard to achieve.
I bet that taught you a lot, though.
It really did. It really did. And I'm glad. I'll never publish any of those novels, but I would never have published my debut, I don't think, unless I'd written them and learned from them. Yeah. So it was when I was meant to be sitting down and editing that I realised that maybe if I just focused on that element of it, because what I really wanted to do was take someone as inspirational, as exciting as Jane Austen, and send her out in the world and give her a mystery to solve. And if I just focused on that element of it, rather than trying to do this like saga stretching across generations, etc., then I might be able to have a crack at it.
In Miss Austen Investigates, did you feel, comparing it with those previous novels, did it make it easier or harder that there was an awful lot of characters that already existed in that world?
It was harder in some ways because there was such an enormous cast, because I'd read so much about Jane Austen and her family.
Yeah.
And they're all kind of real grafters. They're meritocrats. They're always looking for an opportunity. And we've got quite a lot of their letters, so their personalities kind of really shine through to me, especially like her cousin Eliza, who was born in India and came out in France, and lived this real kind of worldly life, the kind of complete opposite to Jane Austen in a way. And there were so many people like that I was desperate to include. I started out with an enormous cast of characters, and every iteration I had to kind of lose one or two people and rein them right back in. And then in a way it was easier because I knew that I had these people, and I just needed to come up with the plot that would show these people off, that would allow me to kind of showcase how wonderful and brilliant and loyal or awful and terrible and vindictive they were. So yeah, it was easier and harder.
Because so obviously you got good at you obviously got good at researching, because you were researching something that you were very interested in. But at what point did you kind of decide to draw the line and go, okay, these are the people that are going to be real, and then anyone outside that, I'm going to make them up? How do you decide that? Is it just the kind of the inner circle that are going to be real?
No, it's all of them. I don't know when to stop researching, and I don't know when to stop putting real people in.
So a lot of the even the sort of minor characters were real people.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Oh yeah.
I was going to say though, credit to you, Jessica, for that, because reading it, I couldn't judge. Because I was thinking about that while I was reading it, and I couldn't judge where it stopped from being these are historical actual characters to that's just someone you've made up, because it moves things along nicely. It was really hard to...
So the only completely fictional person that I've made up is the murder victim. And then all of the stories have some kind of basis in real life. Even what happens
Oh,
to the
wow.
murder victim, there's the seeds of it are in. So Jane Austen's letters are like my Bible, really. We think she wrote about 3,000 letters during her lifetime,
Blimey.
but unfortunately the family destroyed most of them. So we've only got like 161 precious little nuggets of gold to go from. But they're so expressive and they tell us so much about her and her family. So all of the people in the book are based on those people and all of their circumstances and their stories and what happens to the murder victim and the way her life plays out. There is actually a grain of truth in.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Based on a true story.
Wow.
And what I try and do is make sure, so the way that she solves the mystery in the novel, I tried to make that very much driven by the activities that she records doing. So if I look at her letters, I know that she goes shopping, I know that she knows about clothes, I know that she visits the library.
The apothecary, obviously. Yeah.
I love a bit of that, don't they?
So then when I have her going to the library, I made sure to draw the inspiration for the librarian from a real librarian that she mentions in her letters. And then I found out that libraries were often based in apothecary shops. And so that's why in the story, Mrs. Martin, the real librarian, is married to Mr. Martin, who's the apothecary. And then she can stumble across the clue that way.
That's great. You see, I wish I'd known that when I read it.
Yeah, I was thinking that.
Because it's so much more impressive. And it was already impressive. But yeah, that's brilliant.
Well, I have to say, that first bit wasn't actually that bad, was it? For an episode of the Failing Writers podcast.
You were saying about the thousands of letters that Jane Austen wrote. Obviously, in the book, at the end of every chapter or most chapters, there is a piece of correspondence that kind of sums. It's a very nice vehicle, actually, isn't it, for sort of summing up the story and outlining where we stand. Did you? I wanted to ask you. Did you enjoy writing those? Kind of putting yourself right in the mind of Jane Austen and kind of with the language and the movement of her prose kind of being in there.
Yeah, I think that was the thing that was different about this whole novel, in that I really, really enjoyed writing it. And I kind of, I'd gone beyond the point where I was trying to write for a particular audience or to be cool or anything like that. And I was just writing to be as silly as possible, and be as close to my heroine as possible, and be in this world that I've loved researching as possible. So the letters were the last thing I wrote, actually, and they were always in my head, and all through the drafts she would refer to having written these letters. And I did several drafts with my agent Juliet, and we were on the last draft, and Juliet said, I really, really think that we need to see these letters that Jane keeps referring to. And I realised it's that classic thing of wanting to write them but being too scared.
Because I was just going to say that.
Yeah, the thing about writing.
Yes, this will be, oh my God, I actually need to write them now and actually get in that.
Actually in her voice.
Yeah, because, I've written a novel about Jane Austen, and obviously I'm inviting everybody to compare me to Jane Austen, and it's not fair, guys. I'm not going to be Jane Austen. As much as I try, it's not.
What did I do?
Yeah. But so this last kind of note came in from Juliet, if you can just add the letters in, then I think we'll be ready to go on submission. And I was actually on holiday at the time in France in my little caravan with my teenage children, who by then no teenagers, who didn't want to hang out with me. And I'm that annoying person on holiday who's always like, let's do this, let's do that. And my kids and my husband are like, can we just chill? So I gave them a rest and just spent 2 days solidly writing all those letters and just got as silly as I possibly could. And it is a great device in that being able to remind you kind of what's going on and who she's thinking of. But the big joke for me was what happened to all of Jane Austen's letters.
That's what I was going to say. How much fun did you have with the instructions of what to do with the letters? How to destroy them.
And I worried that Juliet would come back and say, this is ridiculous.
That's too silly. Why have you put the silly bit in? That's really silly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's so lovely that, she gave me that final push, because lots of readers come back and say that they're their favourite bit of the
No,
novel.
I think it's lovely, and it kind of reflects what you hope that Jane Austen's wit and that kind of how she just walks on this line of slightly inappropriate but within the bounds of what's decent kind of humour that she has. And I think
Thank you
those
for saying that.
kind of shone it out quite nicely, I thought.
Jessica, what you like as a writer? Because I get the feeling that Jane Austen was actually quite disciplined. I've got a quote here. She wrote at some point, "I am not at all in a humour for writing. I must write on till I am." Which I thought was quite good, quite persevering.
Yeah, that is one of the things. I feel like I should get that tattooed on the back of my hand, really.
How are you? Like, are you, relatively disciplined?
I am.
Or do you have to just really like what you're writing?
No, because of all those years writing about IT, I've come through it. So, I won't say I don't get put off. I mean, I got put off for 10 years and didn't write any fiction. But when I came back to it, that was what I tried to live by, that that whole philosophy of, if I'm not in the mood, so I'm going to write on until I'm in the mood. And the other thing that made a big difference for me, and I'm really sorry to say this if it's going to upset everyone, but I plan. I really, really plan. I plot everything out, and I treat it like a kind of like a project management, really. So I sit down and come up with a concept for a novel, and I plan it out as a project, and I think about my milestones, and then I think about how I'm going to get there, and I try and write a first draft quite quickly and give myself a words count every day, and think, it doesn't matter if those words are rubbish, I'm just going to hit those milestones, and then just go back over it and go back over it and go back over it. And I'm saying all this, but I'm editing book 2, and it's really hard sitting down and forcing yourself to write every day. But yeah, I try and give myself a window, rather than thinking, right, I'm going to sit here all day. I'll sit down and think, right, you've got 90 minutes, because I don't think anyone can concentrate any longer than 90 minutes. So I think you've got 90 minutes. What can you do in 90 minutes? Like, can you write 500 words, or can you look at this scene and make some notes about what needs to change, or can just keep inching forwards every single day, so that it all adds up.
Do you think it's easier or harder now it's your job?
It's easier. Yeah, it's a lot easier, because I've got people waiting on it, and I need that pressure.
Yeah.
I need that dagger, as you said.
You don't mind the pressure then, yeah.
I mean, it is intimidating, because I think every time you finish a project and you've edited it loads of times, you think it's great, and you forget how hard it is when you start to write a new one, and that things are not perfect straight away, and you compare it. And obviously I'm comparing this draft to the finished Miss Austen Investigates, which went through all those iterations, and a whole village of people, from my agent to my editor, copy editors, and etc., that made that novel the kind of finished, polished piece that it is. So yeah, it's hard not to compare it.
But you have taken the easy route out, and you're just churning out another Miss Austen
exactly.
book, aren't you, for your second?
Right. I mean,
the next 10 books, obviously.
Do it in my sleep.
Tom.
But on a serious note on that, though, was that harder to do because you'd kind of used a lot of the material, or was it easy because you were in the zone of that world?
No, it was great, because what I'd done, because I'd made that mistake of trying to do everything in one novel.
Yeah.
With this one, I'd thought about I thought about it as a series right from the beginning,
okay.
because I knew there were so many things that I wanted to say about Jane Austen. And in particular, I really wanted to. What I'm writing against is this stereotype of Jane Austen as a lonely old spinster. So I really wanted to cover the major relationships of her life with her siblings and with her friends and her various romances. And I also wanted to cover the really exciting settings that she went to. And I wanted to look at different crimes that were perhaps inspired by real life crimes. So in order to make that first book manageable, right from the beginning, I sat down and thought, okay, if this was a series and if this is going to tell the story from when her letters start and she's 19 until the point which she starts publishing her own novels, if it's going to tell how she got through that time, then what would I plan and what would I have in different novels? So I'd already planned out this book before I got an agent for book one. So that was really nice to plan it without that pressure. So what happens in the next one is it looks at her relationship with her wealthy brother Neddy, and she leaves like the comfort of Hampshire and she goes down to Kent, and where she's like total fish out of water in this grand high society, and she's meant to be looking after Neddy's kids for the summer, but there's a young woman who's claiming to be a shipwrecked princess who's claiming sanctuary with Neddy's adoptive mum, and therefore might steal the inheritance that they all rely on.
When's that due to come out, that one?
Probably this time next year.
So have you now set yourself up for an annual release of one in the series then?
Well, that'd be nice. I've only got a 2-book deal.
Ah, right, okay.
Yeah.
But you have more in your head in the series.
Yeah. Each of them is kind of not a retelling, but a shadow book to Austen's book. So the first one is very much Jane in her Catherine Morland era, where she's running around, jumping to conclusions, accusing everybody of wrongdoings. And then the next one is inspired by Sense and Sensibility and that difficult relationship with her brother and his wife, and being Jane trying to hold it all together while Cassandra, her sister, who's just found out that her fiance has died, falls apart, really. So it's how they get through that time.
And then the third one is just going to be on...
Well, I have got the third one in my head. The third one, if and when I get there...
So Darcy's naked torso.
Well, yeah, very much so, because it will be inspired by Pride and Prejudice and about Cass, her sister.
You really are a plotter. You're way ahead.
Yeah. But it's just so reassuring, because otherwise I'd have one novel. I'd have Jane like going to Bath and trying to get all the references into all the different novels and all the brothers and sisters. I mean, the reason that in the first Miss Austen Investigates there's, what do they call it, a dramatis personae, a list of characters at the front, is because it's really confusing. There's so many brothers and sisters, and they're all named really like similar. And I'd write these sentences saying like Jane's fourth brother, yada yada, and it's really confusing.
Well, you obviously dealt with that very well in your book, because I am absolutely terrible at keeping tabs on who the hell is who in books or films. I thought about halfway through the book, I thought, hold a minute, I know who this person is. Normally I'd be like, all right, hold a minute, who were they? Which one were they? Were they the... No, that's that. Right. Oh, well, why they do? I actually knew what was going on. So... congratulations. That's amazing.
Excellent. Will you put that in a review for me?
I should do. If only people could realise how bad I am at keeping tabs on characters. It would have some real weight to it. It really would, because I knew what was going on.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
You're listening to the Failing Writers Podcast. Stay tuned for part 3.
So, Jessica, you were describing how you plot. Do you have a kind of a system, or is that just something you developed, or is it something that you learnt and have borrowed from various different things?
Yeah, all of the above. So I did the Curtis Brown course, which was just an online 3-month kind of thing at home, which was really helpful. And then I did another online course, which was kind of the opposite, in that it was kind of a North American philosophy behind it. So it's a Canadian lady called Susie Vidori, and it was very holistic. It was like the opposite to the kind of dry academic way that we might think about writing in the UK. It was like, what's your why? Tell us your why. What's your bumper sticker for this book? And it was much more commercial, and it really appealed to me as the balance from that. And one of the things that she taught me to do on that course was called an inside outline. So every scene, you kind of jot down some bullet points about what's going on the surface. So it might be like Jane is going to the apothecary, And then it's a grid system. So on the other side, you'll talk about what's going on in her head and her heart. And I think it helps get some real tension into scenes when you think about like
and her motivation,
yeah, that action on the surface might not really be what's important. There might be much more going on underneath. And it was really helpful for mystery because I think mystery is quite complicated. You're telling a story about somebody else finding out the truth of another story. So all those clues, etc., you can like weave in and out. So yeah, I do that, and I think my plan for Miss Austen Investigates, the first one, was about 20 pages of bullet points, and then what I do is I constantly use it while I'm editing and going through it as well. So it's a kind of live document.
Yeah, keep you on track. Yeah.
Yeah, as I'm editing at the moment, I'm going through the novel and putting all my notes about what I need to do for this one into that table so that it's all there, so that when I come to it, I don't just sit blankly staring at my screen wondering what to do. Like, I know that I've got things to fix, and I know that I've got things to achieve in each and every scene, and it's just really helpful.
I'm imagining this as like a beautifully bound document of neatly handwritten notes, all little colour-coded bits. It sounds like you're just incredibly well organised.
And then look at what Dave's produced.
It's all on computer. So you forget I worked in IT, so it's all on. It's all on words. I don't actually write anything, which is why I had to practice so hard to write my signature.
Come across if you type
because
it's the longest book signing ever, as Jessica slowly managed to sit with her tongue stuck out between it.
That is exactly how I do it.
Speed up a little bit, Jessica. We've got a big queue.
Have you had any sniffs for anyone optioning it for a screen adaptation?
Wouldn't that be lovely? No, not yet.
Sounds like a Netflix thing to me, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Lads, should we put an offer in?
yeah, okay.
Chip in and see if we can ring fence this one off.
Like a we could do like a sort of a low budget 3-person.
When you say low budget,
we play all the parts.
Very right.
Yeah.
Like that.
I'd like to see this.
Would you?
I think we could do a nice Jane Austen.
What are you going to do with the titles for the series? Have you thought about that? Are they just going to be like Miss Austen Investigates again?
Yeah.
And again.
And again.
Guess what?
Miss Austen still investigates.
Bloody hell, here comes Miss Austen.
So the first one was actually called Miss Austen Investigates the Hapless Milliner.
Oh.
And it is still called that in the US.
Right.
But in the UK, we thought perhaps that was a bit of a mouthful, and we just had it as Miss Austen Investigates.
Mm-hmm.
But then, the next one will be Miss Austen Investigates the Foreign Princess.
Right, okay.
And that's how we'll go from there.
Sounds right. That sounds good. I've got a question here from my wife.
Oh, lovely.
Because your agent sent us a copy of the book, and just before I was about to start it, my wife snaffled it and read it first.
Excellent.
So you've obviously come up with a very promising concept, because she was straight in there. But Katie asks, what is your favourite Austen book and why?
It's such a hard question.
It is. It's like, a killer.
Asking me to choose between my children. But
we all have one. I mean, in terms of favourite children, come on.
So it tends to be the novel that I'm reading at the moment.
That's a cop-out. Come on.
All right. But so when I was writing the first one, obviously, like Northanger Abbey was everything to me. And that was the first Austen I read, and it meant so much to me because of that. And then I got slightly obsessed with Sense and Sensibility. But I think that, objectively speaking, Pride and Prejudice is the best novel ever written in the English language. It's not just Jane Austen's best novel.
Wow.
It's the best novel. It's got everything. It's got plot. It's
brilliant.
got characters. It's got twists. It's funny. It's got dialogue. It's got romance. There's everything in that novel. I think she perfected the art of the novel in Pride and Prejudice, and it is the best.
I want to take you back to a happy day, a happy memory. I found a headline from Bookseller from October 2022. PMJ secures Bull's Jane Austen murder mystery series for 6 figures in 4-way auction. Oh, I bet that was a good day. Tell us about that.
Oh, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. That was the day. Oh,
Come on, give us the full build up, the full story.
It was just Yeah, it was just amazing. I mean, I knew when I got Juliet Mushin's offer of representation that things were going to be good because she represents some giants of historical fiction and cozy crime. So I knew that I could trust her and that she was going to do an amazing job with it. And then we started going out to publishers. And that was, I think, the most stressful time of my life because you just know that you could get an email at any moment which is going to completely change things. I did get a preempt offer and I was just like a rabbit in the headlights. I didn't know what to do with myself because how can you suddenly make that kind of decision? Writing is so slow, isn't it? You're just taking it one sentence by one sentence and then suddenly they're like, decide what to do by the end of the day or this offer's off the table. It's just like, oh God.
Like car salesman. Is that how it works?
Yeah.
Wow.
It was horrendous. I mean, it's wonderful, but also horrendous. Yeah. And then the other offers started coming in, and I just sat down with Juliet and was like, "What do I do?" And she said, "It's up to you, but if you let it go to auction, then you'll have the full publishing experience of meeting all the different publishing houses and seeing what they envision for your book." Yeah. So I thought, okay, that makes me feel like I have some semblance of control there. And I met all the different publishing houses and they were all wonderful. But the thing about Penguin Michael Joseph was that whereas others kind of said, can you make it funnier? Can you make it scarier? They really wanted to help me get George Austen right. And he was so central to the book. And writing him back into Jane Austen's story when he'd been very unfairly, I think, erased by history was really important to me. So that really made me think, like, go with them. And then the money kept going up and up. I mean, that was just surreal. And then also now it's not just that. So it's sold to 18 different territories, which is just, it's just amazing.
Wow.
I still can't believe
Wow, that is amazing.
Yeah, and I don't think that would have happened like if I'd have got that first. I mean, I think for me, it was like a lesson in craft and that there might be a reason to all those disappointing moments because, there was horrendous times when like I really, really cried when that first novel looked like it was going to go somewhere and then it didn't. And it was, coincided with having like young children and really like being, times being quite tough. I mean, I had P&D, I think, when I got the feedback, so that didn't help. Yeah. So, and then, keep on writing and think like, is there any point of this? Is there some massive waste of time? Am I deleting myself? And then breaking through that to a point where I was just consciously writing what made me happy in order to keep myself sane during a difficult time.
Yeah. Well, that's worked out well.
Yeah.
That's probably the answer, isn't it, in some ways?
Yeah. So I might have got that first contemporary romance published if I'd tried hard enough, and then got like an okay publishing experience. But I think having that disappointment and being forced to kind of really up my game and think about all the different ways that I could improve led to the break when it come being a lot bigger.
Yeah.
In terms of like the first version of Miss Austen Investigates, the version that you sent when you were querying, compared to the version that is out now, how different are they?
I still can't believe that Juliet signed me for that first version when you compare it because it's basically the same. It was a lot shorter. It was only 75,000 words and basically the same. There were a lot more characters. So everybody has like at least one brother or sister.
So that was part of the process was like paring it down, like you were talking about before. Yeah.
The spirit of it was there. But yeah, it needs a lot of work, and I'm very lucky and grateful that she saw through that and trusted me to be able to do it, because I suppose when you sign a writer, you don't know if they're going to be willing and able to take that feedback on the chin and keep coming up with the next version and the next version and the next version.
Well done.
Thank you.
Yes.
Well done for persevering. Very impressive.
Well, Jessica, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story.
Yes, very much
in every sense of the word. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, lovely to speak to you.
Thank you guys.
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you, Jessica.
Bye-bye.
Wasn't she lovely?
She was lovely, but we don't have the time to go into how lovely she was.
Tom is referring to the fact that we very often come out of the back of an interview with the phrase, "Oh, weren't they lovely?" But she was lovely.
The trouble is, when she was lovely.
Actually,
It's okay. I think it's okay.
Fine, isn't it? She was lovely. It did get me thinking, though, with the Jane Austen Investigates thing, that we should come up with taking a literary figure and then see if we could mold some kind of genre onto it for a concept, for a book concept.
High concept novels. Oh, we're good at this.
And then get these concepts into an auction, like a 4-way auction for these concepts.
Definitely.
Bag as a 6-figure advance.
Oh, come on.
So we need you need a literary person, real person, real writer,
with a genre tie-in,
and then a genre. Then it's something that builds around them. And obviously, Miss Austen Investigates came out of that. Jane Austen was quite, sort of a big brain on her and what have you, and she was always sticking her fingers into things. That sounds weird.
I'm not sure she was famous for that.
I don't remember that in Pride and Prejudice.
Sticking her nose, sticking her oar,
sticking her nose,
sticking her oar in,
sticking a part of her,
sticking something. She was always sticking something into something else. So that came from that, didn't it? From like her personality. John, do you want to kick us off? What have you got? Because you're the guy that knows all the literary people, so you've probably
you're the historical man.
You'd have picked some historical bigwig, no doubt.
Yeah, I have picked a bigwig, definitely, because the first novel in my series.
Oh my God, he's done a series.
It's called Stephen Kingpin.
Stephen Kingpin.
Stephen Kingpin. Turns out Stephen King is actually a massive crime lord, and he's running a huge US-wide mafia drugs racket from the sleepy, leafy streets of Bangor, Maine.
And because all of his books are really thick, so you could hide a lot of drugs in a thick book, couldn't you?
Like hollowed out books.
Yeah.
Didn't after reading your first novel, John, I thought the bit where you had him offloading drugs on the street from balloons tied to grates in the street was brilliant.
It's clever, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff that crops up in his books later, yeah. But I think that would be a winner.
Well, you said it was a series. So have you got further?
Well, it's a series in the sense that that's the first one of my literary historical figures.
Yeah.
But there are more. But I want one of yours first.
Well, you've come up with multiples.
Oh, I've got loads.
Oh, bloody hell. You see, I can go here because I struggled a bit with this concept, right? And for ages, the best I could come up with was a police procedural with Leo Tolstoy. For no reason other than the police chief in every episode would say...
War and Peace.
No, the police chief would say, I want a report on my desk by the morning, and this time, don't make it War and Peace. And that's as far as I got for ages. And then I thought, do you know what? Similar to what you've done, John, I'm going to employ our old radio technique of starting with a title and working backwards from there, right?
Yeah.
So the title I've got is Call of the Wild.
With Oscar Wilde.
In which Oscar Wilde was given an experimental telephone by Elisha Gray, who was one of the disputed inventors of the telephone and the inventor of the fax machine. Because people often say that Oscar Wilde was ahead of his time, right? And the reason for that is because this telephone, he could call people in the future. That's just like a time-traveling thing with Oscar Wilde.
Oh.
And also there's the sort of there's a nice little tie-in with Elisha Gray and Dorian Gray.
Oh, nice, yeah.
So there we go. It's all plotted out. All from Call of the Wild.
Yeah.
It's good, Dave.
Yeah.
Have you started writing it?
I've got a little post-it note.
Started writing it. It writes itself.
It really does. Yeah.
That's good. You know what's going to be the hardest part of writing that is going to be writing Wilde's witty dialogue.
Oh, it's one of those things, isn't it, when you're writing something that needs
someone
a
really
funny
clever
bit or a clever bit or a massive legal twist that's a brilliant piece of
That's it.
work.
Someone cleverer than you is talking.
Yeah. Someone
That's
cleverer
the
or
problem,
funnier
isn't it?
and you're like, oh.
I figure I can write a framework and just write things like witty response.
Oh,
here.
yeah.
You could do it, yeah. You could use the phone thing, though, Dave, so you can only hear one side of the conversation. So you could have the person talking to him and going,
That's
oh,
it
my
on the
God,
other
that's possibly the wittiest thing I've ever
Ha,
heard.
ha, ha, ha,
Or,
ha.
to make it easier, I could write that actually Oscar Wilde was really dull and all of his witty repartee came from people in the future.
So he's just like rattling off Bob Monkhouse jokes and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Oh, there's a lot of stuff to be done with that one, Dave.
It's a lot of layers in there, isn't it?
That's good.
Yeah, very good.
That is
very
good. Thomas.
Well, I went for Charles Dickens.
I knew someone would
did.
go for Dickens.
Yeah, I think there's a good...
It's good commercial legs, hasn't it?
Yeah.
You know. So Charles Dickens and his wife went across to America in 1842 for a very short period of time. And he was over there, he was trying to get authors together to make copyright protection more of a thing.
Oh, yeah.
Because people were just like ripping all his books off and what have you. And he was trying to get the other writers to go to Congress and but it just didn't happen. They were all kind of against it. Because they were basically, he was coming over as this big, massive author going, oh, this isn't fair. And they're all thinking, Dickens, have a word. You're like massive. Which he kind of came to appreciate and thought, actually, yeah, fair enough. I am kind of, I've become a social phenomenon. That's fair enough.
Yeah.
But I thought, what if while he was over there in Boston, he kind of tapped into an underground elite in the United States that was trying to kind of worm its way into the underworkings of the government.
Oh, yeah. So you got like a political thriller.
Bit of conspiracy.
Yeah, the Dickens conspiracy. Yeah.
I thought you were going to say, and he found himself at Area 51.
Yeah, why not? I mean, why not? There's no rules in this, is there?
No.
But I thought it'd be good. He'd be a good character. Like I was thinking about the Jane Austen thing of it's part of her character that makes it work as an investigator.
Yeah.
I thought he'd be like with his sort of guile and humour and
And the sort of social justice stuff going on.
And being able to sort of tell a tale and act a part.
Yeah.
He'd
and tell a story. Yeah.
So there's quite a rich sort of theme of this in like science fiction works. It sort of reminded me of today. There was a character in 2000 AD, which you'd discussed with Alec Worley. There was a character called Devlin Waugh, loosely based, obviously, on Evelyn Waugh, or Waff, whatever you call him. And he was a sort of paranormal investigator working for the church who was also a vampire and had some sort of relationship with Sherlock Holmes. But so there's a rich theme of that. And then I've got a series of novels with Elvis Presley travelling through time with a sprout in his ear by Robert Rankin. So there's a rich history of this sort of, real figures in bizarre situations.
The other thing, John, if I can move on to another one before we go back to you. Next week, we've got a lovely episode on the Brontes. And I thought, actually, what about them with all their little made-up worlds? What about if they actually went into the made-up world? Like a Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, through the looking glass kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, this is a bit like my novel that we were talking about a few weeks ago. That's similar, isn't it? I can't remember.
I can't remember.
Which one of your works was this, John?
We had to come up with a concept for a cozy mystery.
The bookstore one.
Yeah, the bookstore episode. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, funny you should mention the Brontes because I come up with another one. This part of the series, obviously. This book's called Brontosaurus. And it's a little bit, it's a bit along the lines of yours, Dave. It's sort of Jules Verne meets Jane Eyre. And the Bronte sisters build a time machine.
Nice.
Out of what?
Books. Out of books, bonnets, bathtubs and potatoes, obviously, and get whisked back to the late Cretaceous period. And they like fight T-Rexes and baryonyxes and shit. And
did the name for this novel come up before we fleshed out the concept?
It is. This is a recurring theme.
By
isn't
any
it?
chance?
What did you guess?
Brontosaurus. Was that the way around it happened?
Might have been.
And I think a little honourable mention when Dave was asking exactly what this task was. When I suggested, it could be Dr. Zeus versus the aliens, and the idea that like in Independence Day, where it's just it's done in so many things where it's like a little computer program or the common cold.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
In what's it
yes.
called? Rhyming.
Yeah.
A little thing.
So only Dr. Zeus with his rhyming, his nonsense verse manages to. The aliens just can't stand it and just explode.
They just can't cope with it. They're from such an advanced civilization that basic rhymes somehow disable them. Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
Really freak them out.
Probably works better than Enid Blyton's erotic adventures. Which
a little bit.
I was just trying to think on my feet. I don't know.
So, should we talk about next week? Because Oh, have we got any more before we do that? Sorry.
No, only just another
ahead.
title occurred to me, and I thought,
Oh yeah.
do you know what? You could do like a serial killer thing about somebody who collects the skulls of their victims, and call it Tolkien Heads.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, let's talk about next week.
Let's do that. Well, yeah, it's a bit different, isn't it? We've gone and done another of our weird little documentaries, haven't we, Tom?
Yeah, it's walking, talking.
Yeah.
Oh, this is what you did whilst I was away, wasn't it?
It is, exactly. So this time we are looking into the Bronte sisters. So if you love the Brontes or you don't know much about
Or
them.
dinosaurs.
Or dinosaurs. No, it doesn't involve dinosaurs.
Oh.
Or if you love Kate Bush's Wuthering Heights but haven't got a clue what the chuff she's on about, or you've always, fancied reading a bit, never quite got round to it, come and join us next week. We're hitting the moors. There'll be history, there'll be poetry, there'll be a smidgen of academic rigour, even.
And we get in touch with the countryside, don't we? And their home turf.
Yeah, it's quite good fun as well. So come and join us next week. And then we will be doing we are going back to our 2-week
schedule.
Is it bi-weekly? Does that mean
bi-week
twice a
is
week?
very confusing, isn't it? Whether
Yeah.
it
It is.
twice a week or once every 2
Or once every 2 weeks.
Fortnightly?
Yeah.
Fortnightly.
Let's stick with that.
Yeah,
Good
that's
one.
better,
Good
isn't
one.
it?
Yeah, we'll go back to that.
Well, that's good. Well, I can put my feet up next week then.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we can all relax.
Oh,
It's
brilliant.
done. It's done.
Oh, lovely.
So we should get some writing done in the meantime, really. So when we come back,
Yes.
the episode after that, we'll have to report back that we've been cracking on and producing some output.
No excuses.
No excuses. And we did
As
say
Jessica was saying.
we we were going to come up with some deadlines. Is that for then or is that for now?
Let's do that. That seems like it belongs in that one now.
Okay.
Yeah, what we've not
Doesn't it?
done, we didn't set ourselves a deadline for setting the deadlines.
We're
That's
good
the
at this,
problem.
aren't we?
Very, very.
Yeah.
So we'll do that. We will do that in that episode. That isn't the next episode, but is the episode after the next episode.
We
That
put it
sounds
off
like-
nicely.
That's far.
good.
That's far enough away that we don't need to think about it, isn't it?
Yeah, brilliant.
Excellent.
All right, people. Well, thanks for listening.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for tuning
Please do share the podcast around. Tell people you love it and force them to listen to it.
Yep.
And we'll see you next week for a Bronte adventure.
in. Bronte special. Till then, cheerio.
Ta-ta.
So I think we should come straight off the back. Not say she's lovely.
Well, wasn't she lovely?
She was, though. She was really lovely.
Let Dave say she's lovely. Come on.
Not just Dave, though. We all do
No.
it.
Oh, we all do it. I know.
It's like a
Aren't they
proper.
lovely?
Well, how lovely was that?
Can we not? Can we interview someone where we can
It's a
come off the
massive
back and
knobhead.
say, what a bastard they were. God, I'm glad that's over. Not this one, though. She was lovely, Jessica. What a lovely lady.
Hello.
Hello?
Where's everybody gone?